Hey, Dr. G here, and I'm honored to have Dr. Marley Jones here, who is a specialist in neurofeedback. And if you've wondered if neurofeedback might be the answer to some of your challenges, well, I think this is going to be a very helpful interview for you because I know I'm going to learn a lot about neurofeedback, and Marley is an expert. She is the founder of Harmony Neurofeedback. And where in Florida are you again, Marley?
Well, I live in Satellite Beach. My clinic's in Indian Harbor Beach, but it's one of those things that I can even, rent units and ship them. We've got trainers like me in 76 countries around the world. And so, yeah, I can serve whoever, and I love to visit with people. And there's always Google Translate if I get hung up with someone that
I love it. I love it.
out.
How did you get into neurofeedback? And she's, Marley is a naturopathic doctor, so she's had medical training and that way we all love, using natural ways to help promote the body, heal itself. And so what's the journey like for you?
Okay, let me zoom in here so you're not seeing me look sideways. Okay. Well, let's see. I think the reason why I got into naturopathic medicine was because I didn't want to continue down the same road that I was heading on. I grew up, my parents were horticulturalists, and my dad would, go pick herbs and make a tincture when we were sick. And my mom was a nurse, so she went to the pharmacy. So I kind of had both sides growing up, but I had some chronic illness when I was a kid even. It started in the fourth grade, and I was struggling and couldn't eat properly, and had a lot going on, and nobody knew what it was. They thought it was viral. They thought I was anorexic or bulimic. They didn't know what was going on. I look back now and I know it was toxic mold exposure, because the basement of our home, we had water damage all the time. And I used to have black mold in my clothes growing up. So I struggled with a lot of upper respiratory and GI issues when I was a kid, starting in the fourth grade. And then, so my road to being a part of naturopathy, I'll give you some backstory. So here's what happened. So following that, I was back, I missed a lot of school. And after about 3 or 4 months of anorexic, bulimic type things and not being able to keep food down and not wanting to eat, I started to develop associations with food, because it was a traumatic type experience for me. But, if you know anything about, and I know you work with people with SIRS, and obviously mast cells and histamine bucket load being too much of an issue, it's a thing. So I very likely at that time had wired a lot of associative trauma around food, which affected me quite a bit throughout my life. So, and then when I was 14, I sustained a pretty significant head injury. I was at summer camp and got double bounced off a trampoline and landed in a pile of rocks, heels over my head. And so not long after that, I had my first panic attack. And then I developed just this, inability to connect thoughts, think straight, and just constant fight or flight anxiety state. And I was like that pretty much from being 14 on. And so, you just kind of, and I wasn't medicated or anything like that. I did a lot of relaxation techniques, and even journaled a lot to get through that. And, I think in my generation, that stuff wasn't talked about very much. Anxiety and depression was a buzzword. It's a buzzword now. It wasn't, I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I wasn't going to tell anybody because it was weird. So, and then I would say, let's see, what the next big hurdle for me was in 1999. I graduated from college, had gotten married, and we moved out on an acreage in rural Oklahoma, south of Tulsa. And after out riding my horse a lot, I sustained a lot of tick bites. And so bullseye rashes, and
Oh, wow.
woke up one day and couldn't bend my right index finger. And so, and see, my mom had RA and I watched her suffer. And so when I went to the rheumatologist, I was terrified and scared. And they told me there's no reported cases of Lyme disease in the state of Oklahoma. And instead they told me I had lupus. So, you know, I've had a lot, Dr. G, I've had a lot of diagnoses given. The list is long. And as far as I'm concerned, if you check all the boxes or if you only check some of them, they're just labels. And so,
Right.
yeah. So when I discovered that that's what was going on, I thought, okay, what am I going to do? So, you know, and I was terrified because I watched my mom suffer and I didn't want one more thing wrong with me. So I did go to a certified nutritionist and I got on some whole food supplements. She did a live blood cell analysis and looked at some things. And then it got to the point where she looked at me and she said, you know what, you're out of my league. My stuff was too complicated. And in college and, you know, growing up, I always liked it when guys said I was out of their league, but not a doctor.
Oh, right.
So I ended up going to her doctor, who was a naturopath. He was trained as an MD, DC, and an ND. And that's when we got serious about nutrition. And it's been a really long road for me. And then he introduced me to, you know, things like juicing, whole food supplements, natural hygiene, understanding that the body has the innate ability and the desire to heal itself if given the proper conditions and we get out of the way and we stop the wrongdoing. So I went to school and finished, I think took me a few years because I had to go through training and I was having kids at the time, which by the way, the rheumatologist told me never to have kids because of my immune markers and my blood work showing that it was a really bad idea. But I'd have very wonderful, healthy, smart, healthy boys. So I'm glad for that. And they've kept me going through some dark days. So, yeah, I just had gone through a long journey of, so I would have been infected with Lyme and the co-infections in 1999. I've done lots of homeopathic work, lots of energetic work, lots of the best quality food supplements that you can imagine, changed my diet significantly, and still wasn't doing the best. And I think because when you have a long list of autoimmune conditions, and I don't believe, honestly, in like the allopathic definition of autoimmunity, because I don't think that the body just attacks itself for no reason. I believe it's trying to get to something. And if it has cleared the infection, then maybe there's something else that's dysregulated. And that's where the neuroplasticity in the brain and central nervous system comes into play for me. And so I'd come a really, really long way. I had gotten in touch with, you know, you go down rabbit holes when you're researching to get well. And I learned about Dr. Shoemaker's protocol. And I was too sick to go to Maryland for treatment. And so I found a different doctor who would treat me from the comfort of my bedroom, because at that time I was stuck in bed and I spent years in bed. I missed a lot of my kids growing up because I was very, very sick. I would get to be able, you know, I'd get up and I would give them breakfast and put them on the bus. And then I would go back to bed until they got off the bus at the end of the day. And I would have to medicate to go to baseball games or soccer games or whatever, just to be a part of their life, you know. So I get the whole chronic underlying illness and trying to keep up with life and having FOMO and looking fine, and you're just barely hanging on.
Right. And then a typical doctor's office, you'd also just have normal labs. You know,
mine were a little complicated with some of the
autoimmune,
with the rheumatology panels, but for the most part, I mean, I look fine. You look healthy. Yeah. So, and that was a tough time for me because you well, for me, I've always been a very type A social person, and having Lyme and a host of other things, it's really that my personality and my health were at a tug of war a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so, and my kids never really knew the real me, because I used to have a ton of energy and drive, and I used to accomplish a lot of things. And I was very goal oriented. Whatever I set my mind to, I would accomplish my goals and then some. But then I got to the point where I couldn't even put mascara on. Like, really couldn't. And, I ended up getting chronic pneumonia. My whole entire immune system was just like, I was a sitting duck. Any bug that came along, I got it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So,
I think
yeah, it was definitely a rough 20 plus years for me.
And so how did you bring yourself out of that? What happened next?
So I worked with Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum for a while, and he was the first person that I ever agreed to take medications with. And he's a brilliant man. He's got a lot of books out there. Probably his most well-known book for people with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia is called From Fatigue to Fantastic. He's actually become a very good friend. I have a podcast, and I'm going to be interviewing him on it next month before he retires. So I'm super excited about that. But he changed my life. He got me out of bed. I was not functioning. Yeah. And and I know that you can respect this, because you're a functional med doctor, and you see that there are times medications make sense. And so I remember watching my next door neighbor, who had, this is a realization for me. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and had open heart surgery, and her husband passed away, and she had all kinds of cosmetic surgery done, and just high risk case. And she was out living her best life. And I wouldn't take Tylenol if I had a headache. I would go do an enema instead. And so finally I came to the realization that I'd rather have a false sense of feeling good than a real sense of feeling bad. And so I went ahead and started on some medications with Dr. Teitelbaum. And, they were things like low dose naltrexone and low dose hydrocortisone, and taking, a natural form of thyroid, because I needed those things. My brain wasn't able to produce them. And so whether it's a head injury, or if you've got neuroinflammation, or you've had maybe Epstein-Barr and it has blown a fuse, it's what happens in your hypothalamus. It's the breaker box in your brain. And and it's the same thing with long haul COVID. Really, COVID long haul really is just chronic fatigue syndrome. It's just got a new reason for it. So if you can rehab the brain, I think that's first and foremost the number one thing. And I wish that I could have told myself 20 years ago, before you do anything else, start with the brain. Start with rehabbing the brain. So here I am now, helping other people through neurofeedback and neurotraining in my clinic. And I'm dealing with people with Lyme, mold, anxiety, depression, all of those things. And I know how they feel. I know exactly where they're at. So, but I'm finally on the other side of it. Thank God, because, there were many years in there where I didn't think it would ever end. So it's nice to be able to kind of be on the other side of it and be who I needed when I was younger, and be that person. So I am also, I did my brain certification with Dr. Daniel Amen. I learned at that time, this was probably through COVID. I actually went through the Amen University for the brain health certification. You study a lot of SPECT scans. You listen in on a lot of lectures with psychiatrists and things like that. What I learned was from getting my head hit, and I did have a SPECT scan in 2018 to confirm what I knew, that I had a TBI. Now, was it from Lyme? very possibly. But I also had a lot of concussions. I played flag football in college. I hit my head multiple times when I was a kid. And then the really big one was when I, fallen off the trampoline. Yeah. So, our brain has the consistency of soft butter, and I wouldn't let my kids play tackle football. I don't love it. I love to watch it. My older son played a couple of years, but there's a lot to keeping this thing safe and protecting it. And because it's complicated to rehab it. But what I learned when I did all my certification is it really wasn't too late for me. So
there's hope.
We started with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and I did a lot of that. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it's kind of off label from, just getting the bends, or if you've had a stroke, or if you've had maybe some diabetic neuropathy and circulation issues. But it is so good for so many things. It's very anti-aging. If you can infuse the body with oxygen, it can go after all kinds of stuff. So that helped me tremendously. It's not the most pleasant experience. There's different forms of HBOT therapy, and I left the state of Florida and went back to Oklahoma because my colleagues, when I went to naturopathic school, they actually have a hyperbaric clinic, and I love how they do things there. So I did 57 total dives, and I started to be able to have more energy. Some of the brain training systems that I had done, like a friend of mine who's a physician, she's like, oh, you just need to meditate. I was like, sure.
Meditation,
but I hadn't.
good.
It's good, but I couldn't do it.
More, though. It's like,
yeah. My brain would not allow me to do it. And when you're stuck in a fight or flight response, you don't want to be in your own thoughts. Right. Your own thoughts scare you.
Yeah.
And so I remember by about dive 40, I started to go, okay, I'm starting to actually remember some positive childhood experiences, which if you're doing any types of brain training, things like the Gupta method or DNRS, I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of those.
Oh, yes.
But, they work well if you have enough regulation in your brain to be able to focus. And right. I didn't. And I had thoughts so bad that when I tried to do DNRS, I couldn't stand for the rounds because I couldn't stand for any length of time. Like if I ever wanted to have a conversation with you, we'd have to sit because I would struggle to catch my breath. My heart rate would be crazy. My blood pressure was all over the place. And so I couldn't really do DNRS. I tried really hard at it. I before I could access childhood memories, I would make stuff up. I'd listen to other people's because, there's stuff on YouTube where there's other people out there that share, which YouTube is wonderful. You get lots of free stuff on there.
For everybody who's watching, when people have complex medical illness, which is kind of what I call biotoxin illness or chronic Lyme or SIRS, one of the things that we may suggest to them is that they do some neural retraining that is form of exercises. And so when Marley was trying this, she was unable to even stand for the sessions because of her, heart rate going crazy. But this is something that those of you who do have enough balance in your brain and you have mold or Lyme, it may be helpful. So Annie Hopper dynamic neural retraining and the Gupta program are something I recommend people try. But if you can't do that, you are a great candidate for neurofeedback to try and get back that balance of the brain. And it really helps. It helps with rewiring. So when somebody comes, what can they expect? If they were like, are you going to have to shave part of my head to get spots for the electrodes?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah, you're right. And that's exactly what had happened after the death of my dad. Just that whole grief process was that much more stuff that my nervous system couldn't handle, more trauma and more to process. And so, I got a NeurOptimal unit. It's a machine that's software created in Quebec, Canada. I say all great things come out of Canada because I'm Canadian. And It's non-invasive, it's super simple to use, and it's a different form of neurofeedback than the traditional kind. I used to go to a psych nurse and did the Offmer method of neurofeedback back in 2014. And I think it helped. However, the more that I studied and the more that I looked at NeurOptimal, I'd known about it for several years before I went ahead and pulled the trigger because it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy a home unit for yourself for around $7,500, but there's limited number of sessions on it. So I went ahead and bought a professional unit in July of last year, 2021. And, it was an investment for sure, but I'd also known that if I was driving to another clinic and being put on protocols, several rounds of protocols, I'd have my own neurofeedback unit.
Right.
And the reason why I really leaned into NeurOptimal was because I'm a naturopath, and it is completely naturopathic in its design. Because all it is doing is giving the brain information and telling the brain what it's doing. And it does it at 256 times a second. So you just simply put 3 EEGs on your right ear and 2 EEGs on your left ear and the side of your head.
Okay.
And it's just reading the electrical activity of the brain. So it's telling your brain what it just did, what it's doing, and what it's about to do. And to you, it's in real time, but really it goes through the software program 256 times a second. And it comes back out through just some really beautiful spa-like music that just has these little clicks and pauses and interrupts in it. And the best way for me to describe that, and if you go on my website, you can find videos on the science of NeurOptimal that go a little deeper, but in just kind of simple terms, it's like if you're driving down the interstate and, just like your thinking can get a little off track and you're not in the moment. But if I'm driving down the interstate and I kind of veer off to the side of the road, I'm going to hit those little vibration tracks along the asphalt.
Saved a lot of lives, those have.
Yeah, thank God for those, right? And the thing about it is that doesn't force me back into my lane. If I want to continue on in the ditch, have at it. Go for it. But what it does is it kind of alerts you and it gives you information. Here's what's happening. So then I choose, do I want to straighten out my car on the highway? And that's really how NeurOptimal works. It sounds super simple in layman's terms. And so what it's doing, it's always bringing you back to the present moment. And that's what we're supposed to do in our nervous system. We need to be in the present moment. And for somebody who's been in like full vagal shutdown, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn state, I've lived them all at one time or another. I didn't have any type of resilience to handle stress. I mean, things like Lyme or just head injury or emotional traumas, your nervous system has assaults on it. And if it's not able to regulate back once the event is over, this is where we get stuck. And so the goal with brain training is to really just be able to be mindful and be in the present moment. And I knew for myself that there's two really significant things that my early takeaways were. I see clients now and they all have different beautiful stories about how their brains have become optimized. But the way that I knew that I was better were a couple of things. One was driving. I probably a few months in, both times was on busy roads. I had somebody pull in front of me. And normally if something like that happened, I would have had to go home and take a beta blocker, a Xanax, and go to bed and it would have caused a flare up. Because, it was just a high stress thing. And when you're already in a high stress state and your bucket is full and you have not enough energy to handle basics, any type of stressor just puts you over the top. And so I realized after 2 different people pulled in front of me and I was literally able to like Mario Andretti around them and go into the ditch and get back up again. And, in that moment, I needed to be in a fight or flight state. I needed like super acuity and quick response. I needed that shot of cortisol and adrenaline. But once that is over, you need to be back in the moment. Yeah. Down-regulate the nervous system, and just that your parasympathetic, sympathetic, so it's all balanced, right? And so you're like, whew. So I knew that things were different for me when the bad event happened, and then I was fine. Like my heart rate returned to normal, my breathing returned to normal. I didn't have sweaty palms, and I didn't hurt all over. And then, so physically, emotionally, mentally, NeurOptimal has helped so many people. And for me, one of the key components that I noticed was, and I'm going to put one more layer on it for you guys, is how it has affected me relationally. And I say that because I have someone in my life I'm very close to that has not only, pushed my buttons through my life, they kind of installed them. So
we all have somebody like that.
Yeah, we all have someone like that. And so for me to be around this person as an adult, I used to have to medicate myself. My family physician would be like, fish and family, they're only good for 3 days, And he would say, instead of you trying to self-medicate, I want you to take, just take Xanax to get through it. Is that ideal? No. But sometimes you have to assess, is the toxicity of the pain or the stress worse than the medication? Mm-hmm. And then you decide, well, in this case, the medication is the lesser evil. So I used to have to medicate to be around this person in order to tolerate them. And what I realized after training with NeurOptimal and a lot of people around me that know my relationship and would say, oh, if you do that, you're going to end up in the funny farm. You need to stay away. I was able to go from medicating to tolerating to now appreciating this individual.
Wow.
And after you lose a parent, you realize how fleeting life is, or even any loved one. And time is precious. And so you love people, but if they push your buttons or you're just tolerating them, it's not optimal living. And so now I have this ability, and I'll continue to brain train with NeurOptimal. I own a unit, so I'll just always be optimizing the brain I have. And plus life throws you curveballs too. So I know there's more ups and downs down the road. But what's beautiful is that I'm able to see things now through a completely different perspective. If you think about even you just think about how your lens in your eye is flexible so that you're able to focus and have different perspectives if there's different depths needed or you're in different lighting conditions. So when things change, you need that flexibility and you need that resilience. And I believe that's what NeurOptimal has really helped me go from this really rigid type A idealistic person that if anything just was out of sorts, I would be stressed. Now I'm more go with the flow and so much more resilient and so much more flexible. And it's a beautiful thing because it's like people actually enjoy being around me more now too.
Nice. Well, and we move into Thanksgiving and the holidays, this might be something that if you're worried about going home to the family, that maybe could help, right?
I'm telling you, it's so transformative too. And I work with kids, and the thing about it is you can go have neurofeedback maybe for a child that's, has oppositional defiant disorder, or they got ADHD, or they're having learning disabilities, or even anyone that's on the spectrum. But you can help support that child. But if that child goes home from the clinic and they haven't cleaned up their stuff or haven't done their homework and mom or dad is yelling at them, it's not really helpful. So what I try to do is let people know, hey, you can come in and you can do training with me, but I really want you to have a system in your house. I want everyone in the family to be co-regulating together. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that transpires.
So that's amazing. I love that co-regulating, because if one person is better and everybody else stays the same, it's just,
it's hard to heal properly. And, you know, if you study anything with psychology or even just family systems theory and all of that, we do need to, we're a living organism as a family. We're individuals, but, you know, if we're going to live a holistic lifestyle, you have to take those types of relationships into consideration. And why not have everybody be better together?
oh, always better when we're together. You know that Jack Johnson song.
You're so fun.
I love that song. Well, you know, my family, because when they were little, we used to play Jack Johnson. And, and we went and saw him this summer, just
nice.
Sat on the lawn and saw Jack Johnson. And it was so cool. It was an all age, everybody was there. I mean, all ages was really fun, but it can be better when we're together. And I think, you know, sometimes we go into the holidays and it's a little scary. It's like, what's going to happen this time with my sister or with, you know, I have a great relationship with my sisters, but I know a lot of people don't have the advantage of that. And so if somebody was going to try this, how long does it take each time they do it? Is this is it like an hour? How long?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the program runs 33 minutes and you just have to put the EEGs on. There's a little contact paste that you use and you attach them to, you know, 3 on your right, 2 on your left, and you start the software program. A lot of people can take a nap if you want to. I don't care if you make
just listening to music.
You're listening to music as long as you can hear it. So there's some people that train every day. And now, like I have a colleague in California that will binge watch her Netflix while she's training because she trains every day. Well, this is what's really cool about it. I prefer people that come into the clinic. It's a really Zen-like space that we have, because very few times do we give ourselves a timeout where we're away from a screen. So I tell people, like, if you need to answer your email, then go ahead. But give yourself a little bit of a timeout. I mean, it's all that much better for your brain to just be introspective and tune things out and tune in, because the training works either way, whether you're in a busy coffee shop. I mean, I've been over the ocean and in the middle of Montana before brain training. Yeah. Because it runs on a tablet. And so you do have some sort of a little bit of battery life. And so whatever it takes to train, do that.
I love that. Well, and I interviewed one gentleman who had combined neurofeedback, a similar kind of system, with transcranial light. And he's developing a helmet that you can actually pick which quadrant you're shining the light on. So if you have less activity in one area, so it'll be interesting to see, as we understand more about how we can affect the brain's health, how what kind of amazing things come out for people. There's something that I use. I'm going to show you this quick picture of brain balancing with a hack that I use. So these are using brain mapping before and after. This is a phototherapy patch. So this is like the first session, right before they apply the patch. And then this is after 6 weeks. And so with this patch, like, and you can look and see the connectivity, we're looking for balance, right? So I'm imagining if we were able to look at people's brains, and I know that there's lots of studies out there like this with neurofeedback, that we would see something similar, right? That you go from, sort of chaotic, one-sided into being more balanced. Right. Yeah. And then also I'm interested in, Dr. Marley was telling us how she went and studied the Amen Clinic. Dr. Amen does lots of these scans of the brain where you can see, like, this area of the brain is not using glucose at all, right? Like if they've had a head injury, and looking at befores and afters. I would love to see some befores and afters of that kind of scan. using neurofeedback. Sometime maybe
Right.
we can have another
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good idea. I was just talking with the Florida clinic rep probably 2 weeks ago. And they, Dr. Amen encourages neurofeedback, but they don't do it in-house. At least they might in Costa Mesa. I would have to double check with that. But I mean, yeah, just doing the snapshots of the brain and seeing the blood flow before and after, I'll have to ask that, because I think
well,
that
he should
would be
do it,
great.
right? If nobody's done
Yeah.
that, I mean,
Yeah, it's a great idea.
yeah.
What I do like so much about NeurOptimal is that we look more at the symptom picture of the individual. We journal and we do these tracking tools because it does not involve a protocol, and it does not involve a QEEG snapshot of the brain or brain map.
Which is, you guys, a lot of times that's how they will.
That's how they decide what to do.
Right. Neurofeedback.
Right.
This
And
is
so
different.
it is different. This is a training to really get your brain to go through all of the electrical patterns and all up and down the Hertz scale, so that it is flexible and strong, just like it's kind of, to me, in some ways, I refer to having a NeurOptimal in your house kind of like having a Peloton. Like, why not?
Yeah.
So that
I'm picturing my brain on a bicycle.
Right. It is. It's great. I say it's like, when I say you come do a training session with me, it's like going to the gym and the spa at the same time, because you're getting your brain fitness in, but you're like so uber relaxed, and it's just wonderful. But no, I think that would be a really cool thing to see. But at the same time, I do sometimes shy away, and it's a bit of a paradigm shift. And I know, especially from the medical community, people want to see diagnostics. They want to see a picture. They want to see a snapshot in time. But at the same time, when you're dealing with people with chronic illnesses and their blood work comes back normal, and you're dealing with that, well, I need validation to know what's wrong with me. Or I need, and I had a SPECT scan. I spent a lot of money having the SPECT scan, but it didn't change my protocol.
Right.
All it did was validate what I already knew. And so, I always ask individuals, if you want to do this, you can have it done. And I work with functional med doctors here locally. We partner a lot. And then I also do, I offer discounts to have SPECT scans done with Amen clinics. If anybody wants a referral, I'm happy to provide that for them. You get like 10 to 15% off on whatever your services are. But really, I want to always ask the individual, how are you doing? How do you interpret? Because it's very empowering when you realize that you can train yourself, or you don't have to look at a picture for validation. Instead, you're like, well, how's your sleep? How's your energy? How are you handling stress? And if you can't answer that, I'll ask the spouse or I'll ask the parent, because a lot of times we still have, until you train for a while, you often have these blind spots, and the people around you sometimes notice that there's a difference before you do. So we look really closely at the symptom picture, because I think our body can tell us an awful lot.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, that's amazing. I feel like it opens up a whole new realm of treatment that's non-invasive, that's just training your body towards normal, right? Trying to tap into the body's healing instead of giving it something from the outside.
Right.
And it's just such a message people need to hear, that there's hope. I mean, that's the big thing. Hope is the message. Even if nothing has worked, this might be something worth trying if you guys are in that space.
It's a tool in your toolkit. I don't promise any silver bullet cures, because I had spent, if anybody wanted to actually look at my financials and what my husband and I had spent over 20 plus years of Lyme treatment, it's scary. But so I'm very sensitive to let people know, you know what, it's not a treatment, it's a training. I don't know what your brain's going to do.
Right.
Everybody is different. But I will say, do your research and use your intuition, and do what feels right. more than anything, I want people's limbic systems to regulate. I want them to be able to trust me. But at the same time, I want to respect the intelligent nature of the individual's body and listen to what they feel comfortable with doing. And so if they want to come, I'll coach you. I'll be your biggest cheerleader, but I'm never going to tell you, I think you need 20, 30, 40 sessions. I never do that.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I love that approach, and it's respecting the body's ability to heal. And then also it's putting the responsibility in the person,
Yes, that as
empowering
well.
the client,
Mhm.
because, when I was in, my time of huge fatigue of, we bought that house with a wheelchair ramp because I knew that I was going to
Wow.
be in a wheelchair soon, which fortunately didn't happen.
Not true.
But I had to change my mind about what was happening. That was part of it for me. I mean, I think one of the key pieces was reading a Joe Dispenza book, and realizing I had in my mind that I was declining. I could see my death. I could see the wheelchair. I could see it so clearly. I had to see something else. And so I think that was empowering for me to read about other people who had been able to make a transformation in what seemed like a one-way ticket, down, and able to make that transformation. And I had to change the thoughts that I was thinking in my head. That's when I started to go by my nickname, right? I was like, okay, Linda, I'm not going to let y'all call me Linda anymore. I need to be Sunny now. So I'm Sunny because Linda, although now I go by Linda, just because I'm well, I'm better, I'm normal, I'm feeling good. But for a few years, I was like, no, don't call me Linda. It's Sunny. Because that's how I wanted to be. And it was very therapeutic for me. It's maybe not going to work for everybody, but it helped me. So, it is all about empowerment, and there's many different paths to wellness. And that's, why I have these interviews with people who have such amazing insight into new paths to wellness, like you, Dr. Marley. Thank you. Gosh, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me. It's been really sweet. I look forward to getting to know you more. And I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Was it this book?
Yeah, that's totally the book.
I thought so.
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, you guys. It's a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, so that's funny. Yeah, you got the book right there. So I look forward to having another chat with you. I'm gonna so if you guys want to reach out to Dr. Marley below, I'm gonna put a link to her website, and this neurofeedback could be helpful for you, and she is a great resource. So we'll say goodbye to you guys who are watching us on YouTube.
Bye.
Thank you so much.